All right, good evening, folks. Tonight, I want to talk about the 10,000 hour rule and the things that we've heard some writers say about if you want to be a great writer, just write. I want to talk a little bit about that because while one, that's great advice, two, it doesn't really give you a whole lot of direction on how to build those skills and how to become a great writer, right? And so, I mean, yes, you need to write songs, but not everything should be just about writing finished songs, right? So, like, professional athletes don't get out and just go play games, right? They don't just do basketball games or football games or tennis matches or whatever. They spend time practicing and rehearsing, and that doesn't mean always playing a full-on game, right? Sometimes that means practicing one particular technique over and over and over until they can use it in a practical application. So what does that look like for the songwriter? Okay, so let's take an example. There is a word association, exercise that her name is Kepi. Let me see, I gotta Google this. Coates? I don't want to mispronounce this, but Kepi Coates, Coutts. She has a word association exercise that she uses to start making connections and start trying to build some of those ideas. And so it might be things like opposites, right? So I used this in my song Always in the Dark. Mindful of mindlessness. Mindful and mindless, obviously two opposite things there. And then using those types of word associations. So you might think of like mindful of mindlessness, a peaceful killer, things like that. Things that don't necessarily go together, but trying to make mental connections. The other thing that I do a lot, and I try to make time for this on at least a few times a week, is free associative writing. That is just coming up with a word or phrase and then just writing anything and everything that comes to mind. Usually try to focus on rhyming. Most of the time it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's not supposed to. But the idea is to see what connections the brain is making and start to build and expand and be able to see how far you can take it, right? So see if you can write a word or phrase and then take it out for like 10 pages. And again, it doesn't have to make any literal sense. It's not necessarily supposed to. It's just stream of consciousness writing, but it's made, the idea is that you are putting yourself in that mindset of practicing writing and practicing coming up with all these words that rhyme with each other and then playing off of whatever you previously wrote to come up with your next line. And through that, you can start practicing like, okay, well, maybe I don't want to just rhyme. Maybe I want to come up with a particular rhyme scheme, or maybe I want to write something that makes a little bit of coherent sense with like each playing off. Maybe you want to practice with your wordplay and irony. That's actually a really good way to practice with wordplay and irony. Although the irony piece takes a little bit more intentionality, but it's not necessarily sitting down to write whole songs, but when you're want to practice writing lyrics, you want to practice with these kinds of exercises. Or you might think of just come up with words that rhyme. So like cat, hat, just, coming up with things off the dome here. Bottle full of Maker's Mark, always in the dark. Things like that. And the other thing is, I want to encourage you not to spend hours and hours and hours and hours and hours locked away in some room just trying to come up with stuff. Take 5-10 minutes a day and just write a paragraph or two, right? Or take maybe 3 hours a week. And I would say 3 hours a week might be a lot. If you're not actively engaged in writing songs, if you're practicing, right? And that's what we're talking about here, is like practicing, getting in the groove, in the mindset of being able to build up to writing a whole song. And this is if you haven't written a song yet. And if you have, if you want to start building speed, this actually helps too, especially the stream of consciousness writing bit helps building speed. But the other thing that I've noticed too is just doing some of these. So Always in the Dark was actually just kind of pieced together from multiple little couplets that I had written. And I'm going to be honest, like I would take this to work with me, and while waiting for like a meeting with the boss, or waiting for like somebody to send me an email, or while I'm on hold with a customer or something like that, I would just pull out my little notebook and just start scribbling. Like you're not going to have like a whole hour, but you might have like 2 or 3 minutes, have an idea that pops in your brain, or maybe you hear somebody say something that sounds really cool, and it's not necessarily something that's like super musical, but maybe it's just kind of witty, and you kind of think to yourself, man, that sounds like something I could potentially use. Somebody had said something about having a nervous breakdown and just chain smoking until the feeling subsided. And so I came up with the line, smoking cheap cigarettes till the feeling subsides, but you can't feel the rain until you can't go inside. So you can't know how bad your situation is until you can't get out of it. But you're, doing little things like chain smoking to try and calm yourself down, even though it may, like, hearing little things like that just throughout the day, sometimes working that in. So yes, the point being, just write, but also like have a goal in mind. Don't just, if you sit down to just write, you're going to spend hours staring at a blank page and maybe get a couple of words. Whereas if you're playing with word exercises, if you're playing with writing exercises, or maybe playing with a prompt, you're going to get more done. You're going to have a better idea of what you're doing if you sit down with a goal and a direction in mind. I'll often write down like little song prompts for myself, things like I'll hear things like people talking about using like a flat 7 in a song, a flat 7 chord in a song. And so I'll be like, well, that's different. I haven't really worked with that before. Here, let me working. Let me write this down. I'm gonna write a song with a flat 7. And I'll go home and practice a couple chord progressions, see where like that fits into things, and then kind of start humming and seeing like what works, what doesn't. And you know, maybe over the next few days, weeks, months, whatever, I'll come up with a couple of words that maybe go with that, and start piecing things together, usually pretty slowly. You don't have to do work fast, right? And the other thing is, you don't have to write songs one at a time. Van Gogh used to paint at any given time, he'd have 5 unfinished paintings, but he'd be working on them and finish those usually within like, he'd finish like 3 a week, or more than that, sometimes multiple in a day, but like he would have several going at once and have this whole I guess you would call it like a factory type setup. So you're not always going to have one complete idea just start to finish flow freely. Sometimes you're going to have to take breaks and start on something else and mess with that for a while and come back. And it's important also to give yourself permission to be bad, to not necessarily be an incredible songwriter, especially not at first. Like you're not going to be Bob Dylan overnight. You're not going to be Ed Sheeran overnight. You're not going to be an incredible lyricist or melody writer. Those things come with time. Those things take practice. Just like in sports, you're not going to be LeBron James overnight. You're not going to be Michael Jordan. You're not, whoever your hero is. Those things are going to take work, time and effort put in to hone your skills. And I'm not by any means saying that I am one of those people that have reached that level. I definitely have not, but I do take time to try and better myself and be a better songwriter and stretch myself, different genres, different not doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over. While that's important to build and master your technique, it's also important to expand out and try other things and give yourself permission to fail, essentially. So with that in mind, I'd like to take a little break and listen to a song here called All of My Remaining Time.
And I've been spending all my time with my head stuck in misery, my heart stuck in misery, with the Memphis blues again. And I've been spending way too long looking up at the mountaintops, wondering when I'll climb. You're so sweet now, babe. You're so patient, babe. Sweet and kind. And I will promise to spend all my remaining time with you. I will promise to spend all my remaining time with you. I've been spending all my time with my head up in the clouds, but I'm coming back down. And I've been out on a journey, I've been looking far and wide, for lost pieces of my soul. You're so sweet now, baby. You're so sweet now, baby. Sweet and kind. You're so patient, baby. You're so patient, baby. It's a wonder that you're mine. You're so sweet.
All right, that was All of My Remaining Time. So All of My Remaining Time was originally written for acoustic guitar, just written to be kind of an acoustic blues type of thing. And I actually released it a few years ago as that type of thing. But when we were doing this album, it was brought up that we should do this song as an opener with kind of a high energy drum beat and kind of this high energy whole thing behind it, and kind of the same guitar thing going on but more electrified and just generally, I guess, a more modern sound. I mean, then again, I don't know if I would call that modern. It's still kind of old school, kind of new school, but you get the idea. And so, and then adding some of those effects and some of the panning and stuff like that on there. Just experimenting and playing with it and having fun. And sometimes that can be as much part of the songwriting process too, as opposed to just sitting down with an instrument, writing the lyrics, writing the melody, and getting everything down. Sometimes it's also playing with the actual recording process itself. As we heard Sam say in the last episode, some of the audio artifacts on his song My Sacrifice, especially there at the end where everything kind of gets chaotic and then just fades out, he was saying that some of the audio artifacts and the effects in that were he dropped some cables and then just put a shit ton of reverb and delay on it, and we get this wild and chaotic ending that doesn't sound anything. It doesn't sound anything like dropping cables. It sounds like all the instruments just going wild and degrading. But sometimes the creative process is and can be as much playing with the recording process as it is playing with the writing process. So don't take that out of take that in mind. Keep that in mind, is that like the creative process for creating a work of art is as much about every step in that chain. It's about how you write the lyrics, how you construct the melody, how you construct the background music, because some of the harmonic instruments, whether you choose to for piano or banjo or whatever instrument you choose to throw in there, that is going to set the tone for the dynamic of the whole song. And you can change the entire dynamic of the song just by changing some of the harmonic structure and the instruments. Whether you are playing whether you're just strumming chords or whether you're playing harmonic notes or riffs, you can really change the entire feel and vibe of a song. And then the recording process, like we said, it might be adding reverb or compression in the right places, or panning the certain vocals or certain instrumental tracks in certain ways. It might be like Jimi Hendrix with Castles Made of Sand, taking the one of the guitar parts and reversing the tape to record that so that it records the guitar part backwards to get that kind of effect. Or actually I do something similar on, what song is that? One of my psychedelic songs. where I actually did that to the drums. I put a delay on the drums and then reversed it. I reversed it in a different track, but and that definitely creates a unique vibe for the rest of the song, which that one was actually, can't remember the name of it right now, but that was actually inspired by the show Legion. And some of the questioning of like, is this real, is it not, is this like, what's going on here? And so like watching that TV show really kind of inspired me to write that song. And then lastly, don't leave out the distribution process and the advertising process, because how you advertise a song, the story that you choose to spin around that song, is going to affect the way people see it. Now, I'm not saying you should be disingenuous at all. Tell the truth, don't lie to people, but sometimes Tom Waits is a master of this, and actually I think he just straight up lies to people about some of the stories behind some of his songs, but maybe I'm wrong. But he's a master of having this very carefully curated persona and how his songs come to be, and the stories around the origins of the songs, right? I think Robert Johnson, the mythos of Robert Johnson will always be greater than whatever actually happened. But the mythos of Robert Johnson having gone down to the crossroads and being chased by supernatural forces throughout his entire life and constantly being on the run before they finally caught up to him, like that, I think sold his music. Don't get me wrong, the guy's an incredible guitar player and absolutely incredible songwriter, but don't discount the mythos surrounding the music itself as well. So when you go to talk to people giving interviews, when you go to talk to some of your fans, don't discount the mythos that you were creating around this music. Again, I'm not an advocate for lying to people. Don't lie to people, but you can tell stories, you can tell the truth in different ways, right? And people will understand that you are telling a good story. And people will kind of latch on to what you're doing. We're going to take a little break, and we're going to listen to one more song called Caesar and Brutus.
Et tu, Brute? What were you thinking? Standing there with your knife. What were you thinking when in your hands you held my life? What did your memory come to recall? My old friend. Think I betrayed you, that I was lost? Did you think back to the war and all the lives that it cost? Will you ponder the meaning of life my old friend. Some wounds won't heal with the passage of time. Some work their way into verse and rhyme, and these poems are written in blood, a history of man drugged through the mud. They tell of love, friendship, and life, my old friend.
All right, that was Caesar and Brutus. So for those of you who don't know, this recording was recorded in 2017, and it was actually on my first album called Walk With Me that was released in 2018, I think. It kind of shows off where I was. I don't want to say where I started, because I started writing as a teenager, and very few of those songs will you ever hear. I think I wrote Lady in the House of Glass probably when I was 17, so I'm not going to play that on the podcast, at least not tonight. But this kind of juxtaposes some of the changes in my writing style, right? And the changes in my music. And I wanted to talk about, sometimes it's not necessarily about complicating the process, because sometimes you don't necessarily have everything to complicate the process, and sometimes you just need to go, strip everything down and go back to basics. This song was actually recorded with a USB mic, a very cheap Toshiba laptop, with a crappy sound card, and Audacity, which was a free DAW that had very few plugins, effects. I think at most I had reverb. I had a little bit of reverb. I had some compression and EQ, and I think that's pretty much it. And just knowing how to use that with my guitar, everything was cut live, so everything you hear is me playing and singing at the same time. And so it was trying to get that balance between the voice and between, and the USB mic was not on a stand, it was set on a dresser, if I'm not mistaken, and I was sitting in a chair that was lowered down, and I shouldn't say lowered down, but it was, so the mic was about at my neck level, and then I'm kind of leaned over to try and get my voice closer to the mic than the guitar is, so that my voice would be closer, my voice would be louder than the guitar, while also singing kind of softly, to get that, what's the word? Intimate feel. That's the other thing, is it's making music is as much about performance as it is writing it, so you also need to know how to deliver that song, especially if you are going to be the one singing it and performing it, and if you're trying to sell this to an artist, you need to be able to perform it in such a way that's going to convince the artist that they want to sing it. Because you could write the greatest song in the world, and if you don't know how to deliver that song, there's a very real chance that the artists aren't going to want to sing it, because they don't see the potential in it. You have to know how to deliver that song. in the 90s, Johnny Cash cut several records with Rick Rubin after years of struggling with Columbia Records and Mercury Polygram. And he had kind of had this same sound that he had had throughout his whole career. And Rick Rubin partnered him with these acts like The Cure and The Misfits and Nine Inch Nails and Tom Petty, and partnered him with all these people and brought a heaviness, not necessarily in a sense of like the heaviness of like Black Sabbath or anything like that, but just this heavy, world-weary feeling around that is his voice. And the instruments are very simple for the most part, and everything is centered around making his voice carry the song, and it worked. I think, in my opinion, the recordings he did with Rick Rubin and the recordings he did with Sam Phillips are by far the best recordings of his whole career. That's not to say that the Folsom Prison album wasn't incredible. That's not to say that he didn't do other albums that were great, but those albums had a hunger and a punch to them that a lot of his other work, a lot of other producers and studios just couldn't quite work with him and bring that out, right? That's really the role of a producer, is to bring out the best qualities of the artist and bring out the best qualities in the writing team and in the instrumentalist team, and really their job is to bring everybody together and try to breed this creativity, and so that the magic can happen, right? You don't always need a producer, but for certain, if a producer knows what they're doing, knows how to pair people together, incredible things can happen. So I guess to recap, sometimes break out of your shell, do things that you aren't used to doing, and if you find yourself in a rut, sometimes it's best to go back to basics. And above all, just practice. Practice with your word exercises, your writing exercises. Practice putting chords together and creating melodic structures. Practice with short pieces, practice with long pieces. Don't necessarily worry about getting it all the way out to 2 or 3 minutes. Maybe just like a couple of bars here or there, you know, and just to kind of build that mentality, right? And the more you do that, you will work up to writing a whole song. And of course, the more you do that, also the better your songwriting is going to get. And then, of course, if you're working in a home studio, I can't say this enough, practice working with your equipment. Play cover songs and just record yourself, and practice with the compression, practice with the EQ. See what, don't be afraid to get in there and see what everything does and figure out what sounds good, what you like. Experiment with things. You're not creating this to release it, you are creating this to figure out how all of your equipment works and the best ways and the most creative ways to apply all of this knowledge and to build this knowledge, right? The best ways to, whether you want to use compression to bring a certain track more forward into the mix or push it back into the mix where it's not as heard. Practicing all of the steps of creation in your process, whatever that looks like. And don't try to be anyone else, right? The best ways to be like your heroes is to not be like them, is to be yourself, right? And if you're still exploring what that looks like, that's okay. If you need to experiment with one of the things that I did early on as a teenager, I would take my favorite songs and I would just write, I meant to say this earlier, I would write additional verses to them. Not that I was ever going to publish any of this, but the whole point was to get my feet wet into songwriting and to practice in a practical way that I could play at home and mess around with, show my friends. But write, I really liked Bob Dylan songs, so I would write extra verses. I probably wrote like 40 something verses to Mr. Tambourine Man, but that practice really kind of gave me the feel for the guts and the structure of how songwriting worked, or how certain styles and how like certain structures work. So it's okay to analyze and to try to dissect and see what your favorite songs are made out of. I highly encourage that, but don't get stuck copying one particular artist. Don't get stuck copying one particular style, right? Say if you like rap, start getting into like breaking down rap, but start looking into who your favorite artists, and this goes for anybody. Start looking into who your favorite artists, who inspired them, right? So, and if you want to create great pop songs, look at like the history of pop, look at like the history of whatever genre, look at what inspired those things, what sounds they're pulling from, what are some similar genres, what are some genres that are very, very different. If you're into heavy metal, maybe try looking into jazz, or classical is not that different from metal, to be honest. But, or hell, try looking into country and dissecting that. And if you're into country, maybe try looking into like jazz and jazz fusion music, experimental stuff. As much as I love country music, they have this tendency to kind of write themselves into a box. So don't be that guy that writes yourself into a box. Know what you want to do, but also experiment with different techniques. See what other people are doing in other genres and what techniques they're applying, and see if that can potentially benefit you. Always look to improve your craft. Alright, well, we're getting close to 40 minutes. Figure I'd better cut it off here. We're going to play one more song, and then we will see you next week.